I really do appreciate the work that you all do and all the volunteers. It's important that people get to be informed and entertained as well. So fantastic service and fantastic reach.
Q Talks with Liz Bailey. Our access to audio programmes are sponsored by Impact Funding Partners, the R.S. McDonald Charitable Trust and the Suter Charitable Trust. To find out more about how to access our services, visit CueAndReview.com or email aaatl@CueAndReview.com. This programme was produced and presented by our Access to Audio Ambassador team leader, Liz Bailey, and edited by our Recruitment Training Officer, Alistair McPhee. So, welcome to the 16th edition of Q Talks from the Cue and Review Print Speaking to the Blind virtual studio, as we're sadly still not back in our own studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre in Crowhill Road. Now, for our daily podcast listeners and also for our volunteer readers, today I'm joined by a rather important guest from the Cue and Review perspective. That's the main man himself, the Editor-in-Chief of Newsquest Scotland, Donald Martin. Welcome, Donald.
Thank you, Alistair. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to reconnect with Bishopbriggs and my old school in some way.
You've just said there that you are actually an old Bishopbriggs High School boy. I think we were founded in 1982 in the old store cupboard and on the third floor. But I think by then you'd actually already headed off to university. Is that right?
Yes, I'd probably been banished to that store cupboard during my days at Bishopbriggs High, but I managed to get to Glasgow University at the tender age of 17 to do politics and economics as part of a social sciences degree. And I have to say it's proved very useful as my career's gone on.
And was it while you were at school, or was it when you went to university that you thought about journalism as a career?
I think it goes back as far, Alistair, as maybe primary 1 or 2.
Right.
Because I think I remember writing something, what do you want to do when you grow up? When I wrote, I want to be an editor. Which rather, I think, alarmed the teacher, because I think her husband, I believe, so the story went, I was told, according to my parents, was a journalist, but not an editor. So I felt it was rather grand. But the reason for that was my grandfather was an editor of a national newspaper, The Express. So he was Jack Campbell. And it's just always been in me. That's all I've ever wanted to do.
So, I mean, when I had a bit of a yearning to do journalism, I freely admit that this is my ideal. I'm reaching, never mind being the boss at Cue and Review, I'm reaching my peak at the moment doing these sorts of Q Talk interviews, because basically at school I also wanted to do journalism, but for me, trying to get into Heriot Watt was where I tried to go. And despite at that point having already interviewed Margaret Thatcher and Princess Anne, they turned me down, which I was really miffed at. But I must admit, for me, when it came to my parents and when it came to school careers advisors and all that, they kept saying, why is it you want to do journalism? And my answer had always been, I'm nosy. I like to know things. I like the power of a microphone. When we first started doing Cue and Review, having the old GVCs and a microphone, you got the chance to go places nobody else got to go, and you got to ask questions that nobody else got to ask. And I must admit, that's what I loved about journalism, or the idea of journalism. Was there a bit of that in you? Would you admit to being nosy?
Oh, I'm certainly curious. I don't know that when I was young, it was about sort of nosiness as such. I think I kind of liked news and events and dramas and happenings. I think, so I was always interested in what was going on and had a good interest in current affairs. But you're right, Alistair, it's a fabulous, fabulous job. You get to meet so many interesting people and you get to do so many great things and cover so many events.
Well, Liam, the episode 15 with Liam McCann at Central FM, Liam's actually, he and I, he came along when he was 16 to Cue and Review. And we used to say to him, the two of us, we've got the perfect faces for radio. and he went on to have a glittering career in Scottish radio. But now at Central, he's actually just bemoaning the fact that he's actually now constantly got to think about his appearance, because now journalists on radio are being encouraged to go out and gather their own stories. They're being encouraged to go out and video themselves, selfie themselves doing reports for radio broadcasts. What has changed for newspapers? I mean, I assume, I won't say anything about age here, although I did to Liam, but did you start out with your biro pen and your notebook, or were you already by that time on the recorder?
Oh, I had my notebook and my pencils, and I bashed away on typewriters in the old days of hot metal.
Right.
Give the car. So, I am, yes, fairly ancient now. So I watched the birth as we moved on to new technology and started typing into computers. It's amazing when you look back at that, how did we actually produce papers so well in the past, considering it was really quite difficult.
Yeah. And I mean, from a journalism point of view, what's changed for the actual journalists now? If a journalist was coming to the Herald now, what would they expect to be issued with on day one, or would they have to buy their own? Is the other answer to that question?
No, we provide them with their own kit, but there's an expectation now that any journalist coming through is a multimedia journalist. They're not just about writing for print, but they must be able to work across digital, whether it's doing anything from broadcast, both audio and visual if required, but also writing for our website. And that might be just putting stories up immediately, as opposed to in the old days of print, where you could spend time and polish it, and you're producing it for the next day. So, I remember talking, I used to do some things with training for some journalists and asking them, are we asking too much of you as young students coming through that expected to have all these skills, including actually editing or producing pages? But they looked at me as if I was daft, because that's their world. They've been brought up in all this modern technology. It's effortless for them. It's me that struggles.
Well, see, that's again why, checking out your LinkedIn profile, checking out when it was you went to university, etc. We haven't really discussed age, but I must admit, it was the other week we were sitting thinking, my wife and I were thinking about dial-up modems and remembering the 56K dial-up and that being the in thing. But that's actually now 20 plus years ago. And that's again where, I think even from our perspective, we've gone through reel to cassette to digital recording, etc. But I think that's, newspapers in general are changing, and I think that must be one of the things that's affecting you during lockdown at the moment. Are you finding that, the move from print media or print output to maybe digital output has been sped up? Has there been a radical change?
I think what's great is that we are able to produce newspapers in a digital world. So when the pandemic hit, we could satisfy that demand, and we have seen subscriptions online rise quite considerably, as it was more difficult for people to go out and get physical paper. So it's been, a blessing in many ways. It's probably accelerated the sort of digital transformation that we all expect of the media world. So it's brought it forward, because we're having to do more and more online, and thank goodness we can do that now, so that we can keep people informed and entertained, hopefully too.
And just how many newspapers is it that you are editor-in-chief of? I mean, again, you're the editor-in-chief of Newsquest Scotland. Is that all of the titles, not just the 3 that I would think of?
Yes, so editor-in-chief of Newsquest Scotland's title. So there's 26 in Scotland and 1 in Ireland. But in essence, that's maybe just an overview. I'm also editor of the Herald and the Herald on Sunday. That's probably the principal job that I have, is to edit these papers 7 days a week, and obviously look at the website as well. So it consumes a lot of my time, but it's great fun.
Oh, I must admit, I've always been very jealous of anyone who has a journalism career. I wrote one column. I will tell you this. I wrote one column for the Sunday Herald. You asked me, or one of your predecessors asked me to do a 7-day column for the Sunday Herald, which I love doing. But it's I think for me it's also the fact that if you look at different newspapers, you know, if you read a variety of newspapers, you get a variety of opinions, and perhaps maybe being a tad controversial, you know, in terms of television news, you really don't have a wide variety of opinion. I believe that Andrew Neil's about to chair a new broadcast company, but where they're going to, there seems to be a suggestion they will be the Fox News of UK news broadcast. We'll wait and see what happens. But I mean, how would you say the Newsquest titles are positioned? Are you sort of left leaning, mid centre ground? How would you describe yourselves?
Well, I think I'll just talk about the Herald and the Herald on Sunday specifically, because part of our stable has got the National, and the National is catering for those that are in support of independence. The Herald's got a difficult issue to deal with because it's balanced. We are trying to provide a variety of opinions on all sides, and that sometimes means that those that are either, let's say, Conservative or Labour or SNP, people always find fault in what we're doing and imagine that there's a bias somewhere, whether it's pro-unionist or pro-SNP. And, you know, I actually keep a note of all the complaints we get about bias because they're actually perfectly balanced. You know, like it's very from one side.
You annoy everybody.
So, yeah, and you must be doing our job. Well, we don't please everyone. It would be a lot easier if we took a particular stance on issues and then, you know, defined readership that only wanted that. But I think it's important, particularly in a fairly divided country that we've got, that we provide a platform for people to be able to share all manners of opinions and views. And I expect my journalists are neutral. We analyse the news, but I have a fantastic selection of columnists, as I say, who every day provide interesting debating points, shall we say. And that's our role. We've got to inform and educate. I think in this world where people rely on a lot of comment and news online, it's edited, whether by an algorithm, to their particular views. So you don't get to see the other side. And that's where the Herald comes in. I'd like to think that you can form an opinion when you've read contrasting views.
Fantastic. Well, certainly our 2,500 visually impaired listeners across the UK, and in fact, looking at some of the stats across Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, apparently as well, for some reason. But I mean, our listeners appreciate the fact that we are trying to provide a daily service, and we're able to do that through the British Wireless for the Blind Fund app and their internet radio players. You must actually be rather appreciative, says he, putting words in your mouth, of the volunteers who are currently reading from home, reading the National in the evening times and the Herald Scotland. I mean, had you fully realised just what was involved with talking newspapers before we started talking to you?
No, I'll be honest, I didn't realise the extent of the service you provide, and having chatted to you before, and now it's amazing. I really do appreciate the work that you all do and all the volunteers. It's important that people get to be informed and entertained as well. So fantastic service and fantastic reach.
And how do you see maybe your newspapers being more accessible to visually and reading and disabled people in general in the future?
Well, as you know, I'd like to work closer in partnership with you. I'd like to get more of our content available to your audience. And I want to explore as many ways as we possibly can do that, whether it's myself reading out articles or some of my staff, and, you know, hopefully giving access to, you know, our online service, where our e-edition, you can magnify the pages of the papers. So I think there's opportunities there, and it's important, as I say, people are informed.
So if any of our listeners want to get in touch with you at Newsquest to tell you how wonderful that the CueAndReview service is, or even if they've maybe got a story for you, what are the best ways to contact you, Donald?
Well, you can send an email to me direct at editor@theherald.co.uk. If you're wanting to call about a story, maybe a central number, probably 0141 302 7633, or you can write to us at our postal address, which is our print plant, which is at 125 Fullerton Drive, Glasgow East Investment Park, Glasgow G32 8FG.
Can I just check there? Have you by any chance recently moved premises?
Yes, the offices in Renfield Street. We didn't renew the lease. We'd been there for nearly 20 years, and we're currently in the process of securing other city centre premises.
Fantastic.
But obviously, with the pandemic, we've had a sort of temporary offices we've been working in, and most of us, like I am now, are working from home. So hopefully when things settle down, we can move in the new year to new city centre offices.
Well, as always with the Q Talks interviews, can I thank you very much for your time today, Donald, but especially we will show our appreciation by sending you one of our virtual ambassadorial certificates as an Access to Audio ambassador for CueAndReview. Unfortunately, we are cheapskates and we do not send you a box of Ferrero Rocher, but I suspect that perhaps your PA might be the one who needs to get the chocolates in the future, if everybody phones you.
I think my PA Janice deserves chocolates and medals for handling everything on my behalf. She's certainly an absolute star. But it's been a pleasure connecting with you, and I hope it won't be too long before I can talk again.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Donald. Thanks for your time. Q Talks with Liz Bailey. Our Access to Audio programmes are sponsored by Impact Funding Partners, the R.S. Macdonald Charitable Trust and the Suter Charitable Trust. To find out more about how to access our services, visit CueAndReview.com or email aaatl@CueAndReview.com. This programme was produced and presented by our Access to Audio Ambassador team leader, Liz Bailey, and edited by our Recruitment Training Officer, Alistair McPhee.